want my kids to know that the last words they heard from me when my time does come, those words were, I love you. In those moments, we have that extra reserve of defiance, of resilience, of fight. I think the power of the will and tuning into our will when we need to, when we must, is really, really, really important. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Code 3 Life Reinvented. I'm your host, AJ Jones, and I want to thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. I'm going to be really honest here. In fact, this is going to be a solo episode. I'm going to share a story that is incredibly near and dear to me. I'm going to tell this story from the heart. I have no script. It's going to get raw, a little vulnerable, and I'm pretty sure you might hear a little colorful language at one point in this story. So be advised. I want to paint a picture for you. I want to go back in time to Saturday, October 8th, 2016. The time I was living in the center of Marin County, a beautiful place just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. And it was a quintessentially beautiful fall day. I had scheduled a mountain bike ride with 3 friends, and we were scheduled to meet at a meeting point at 9:30 in the morning. When I woke up, I looked outside, not a cloud in the sky. Temperatures were going to top out probably in the high 70s, if I remember correctly. Just a beautiful day. I was with the kids this particular weekend. My wife, Liz, was traveling for work. So I was in charge, so to speak. And as I got ready to go mountain bike riding, I helped get the kids fed. And after they ate, they went and sat on the family room sofa and I think they got on their phones. And I was running late to meet my friends, so I was in a hurry to run out the door. And I ran through the family room towards the garage and just basically shouted over my shoulder, I'll see you later. I'll be back in a couple hours. We'll have lunch when I get back. And out I went. And I went and met my friends. And if you know my story or have heard me tell parts of it in other episodes, you'll know we went on a mountain bike ride, obviously. And on a pretty steep ascent is when the first wave of the heart attack happened through a sudden loss of strength and on from there. And this story is not about the heart attack itself. At the time that this all was happening, none of us knew what really was happening to me. My 3 friends, thank goodness, knew something was really wrong, but they didn't know what it was. And we rode our bikes down once we determined that I was unfit to keep climbing. And we rode our bikes and we walked. In fact, I walked for 40 minutes getting down the trail as this, what I would soon find to be a heart attack, was happening. I got in my friend's car and he drove me about 4 miles to the local hospital. And as we went to the hospital, we drove literally right by our house. And I begged him to pull over and drop me off. I begged him, and I was wheezing and I was in extraordinary pain. Let me set this up. I'm in extraordinary chest pain. It hurts so much to breathe. It feels like there are a million needles in my chest that are pricking me every time my chest cavity expands as I intake some air in my lungs. I was probably sounded like a chain-smoking asthmatic. I was wheezing so much. I just begged him to take me home. And I said, look, I'm just going to take some Pepto-Bismol and drink some soda water and I'm going to be fine. He said, no. And I said, look, my kids are home alone. I need to be with them. He said, absolutely not. You need help right away. And I protested a 3rd time. I don't have my wallet with me. I don't have my insurance information or my ID. And he wanted none of it. And he just focused on the road ahead with his hands at 10 and 2, holding on to his steering wheel, white knuckling as if someone was trying to yank the steering wheel out of his hands. I'll never forget it. Got to the hospital and I walked into the triage area and met the receptionist and explained how I was feeling. And they immediately pulled me into the emergency room. That's the hack. If you want to get through an emergency room, tell them your chest hurts and you're having trouble breathing. And that was my experience. It wasn't long after that, probably a minute or 2, that I found out I was having a heart attack. They had put defibrillators on my chest, and the cardiologist who was working in the hospital that day came down and told me the pretty frightening news. The part that I want to share with you is what happened next. And I think about it all these years later, nearly 9 years later, and it's still so visceral and real to me. So at this point, they'd ascertained I'm having a heart attack. I'm in such pain. Now they've started to give me painkillers and things along those lines. I did I was unwitting to that. I didn't know what was happening. And they pulled back the blue curtains in the emergency room. I'm on a gurney. I'm still in my mountain biking clothes. I've got IVs in my arms. And I think 3 nurses, if I remember correctly, it's all admittedly very fuzzy, started to run with me in the hospital towards the cath lab where they do emergency cardiac procedures. And this hospital was a trauma 1 hospital and had those facilities, thank goodness. And so the nurses are pushing me on the gurney and pushing the IV lines next to me, literally jogging down the hall. I'm laying there helpless in extraordinarily but somewhat muted pain. And I'm just watching the white ceiling tiles race by overhead. And I'm kind of starting to fade a little bit. I don't want to glorify this. I don't want to be histrionic in any way. But consciousness was a little funky for me at this moment. And I had 3 thoughts. And these are the 3 thoughts. And the point of this podcast are what these 3 thoughts were at a very, very crucial time, in a moment, as they say, a do or die moment. And as we're going, the first thought that came into my mind is, I don't want my wife, Liz, to fly home a widow. I didn't want to check out of here this day and lay that at her feet. I wanted to have a proper goodbye. If I was going to be leaving this planet, I wanted to do it properly and say the things that needed to be said. And I just so annoyed that I just did not want this to happen. And I just couldn't imagine what that would be like for her. And so that was my first thought. My second thought was, why, oh, why did I run out of the house that morning and not tell my kids I love them? 3 very basic monosyllabic words. I love you. I didn't say that because I was late to meet my friends. I was in a hurry to go mountain biking. And I vowed in that moment, if I survive, that will never happen again. Because I want my kids to know that the last words they heard from me when my time does come, those words were, I love you. And I was so upset. And I made a massive vow there on the gurney as we're flying through the halls of the hallway towards the cath lab, that would never happen again. And as I said earlier, my consciousness was fading. Things were starting to, granted, I'm in a hospital and everything's white and sterile in a hospital. I'm out of it. I'm loopy. I'm fading. Again, I don't want to try to glamorize something that was really a very scary moment. I started to see a figure take shape ahead of me in the space between my eyes and the ceiling tiles. It was a shape of a being of some capacity. And I don't know. I can best describe it as Gandalf the White, if you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It was sort of like that, not as crystallized. And there was a hand that was extended to me. It was very loose. It wasn't totally formed. I didn't know if I was imagining it or what is happening. And as that vision, so to speak, started to form a little bit in front of me or above me, I don't know, I had my third thought. And my third thought, I think, played a massive role in my survival. I said, this is not going to fucking happen today. I am going to walk out of this fucking hospital on my own 2 feet and of my own fucking volition. That is exactly what's going to fucking happen today. And I know I just dropped several F-bombs there, but that's literally what I thought. I don't know where that reserve of steel came from that reinforced my will, but it was there. And no sooner had I had those thoughts than the foot of my gurney sort of pushed the 2 doors into the cath lab open, and they got my gurney next to the operating table, got me on the operating table, stripped me down, and started their procedure. And about 45 minutes later, I could take the most beautiful, pain-free breath of air, the most beautiful, wonderful breath of air, the air of life. And I'll stop the story there and just reflect for a moment on those 3 thoughts. I wanted Liz, if I was going to leave and die and check out of this world, I wanted a proper goodbye with Liz. 2, I wanted to be sure that I never let a moment go by where I wasn't letting my kids know that their dad loved them. And there would be no doubt that that was how I felt. And then the third piece, just around, I guess, in those moments, we have that extra reserve of defiance, of resilience, of fight. It was incredible. And I'm grateful that I dug into that well that I frankly didn't know that I had. here's where I'm going to leave things. What's your takeaway from what I've shared here? And I think as it relates to what we're trying to do with Code 3 Life Reinvented is to explore these moments of growth. And as we go through these calamities or these transitions that maybe weren't our choice, how do we push through them? How do we marshal our energy and our resources to move through them? And what are some lessons we learn along the way? And on this particular story, I think there were three things that come to me, as I think about this story I've just shared. The first is about love. I did not want Liz flying home a widow. That was so important. And I think the love in what we do and how we engage with life is so important. I think the second lesson here is around presence. And we need to know that we never know when something's going to happen. And we shouldn't miss an opportunity to do something special, to say something special, to acknowledge how great our life is, even though we are incredibly challenged and might be feeling we're having the ultimate worst day of all time, because I've certainly felt like I've had my share of those. But I guess there aren't ordinary days. They're days that we choose and can practice presence. And so I think that was a second big takeaway from me. And then I think the third piece, which might be a little self-evident here, is around will. Deep down, I'd like to believe in the power of humanity to fight for that extra chance, to dig deep when we have to, even though the odds might seem pretty insurmountable. And certainly there's stories and movies and books and fiction and otherwise about the human capacity to fight and to overcome long odds. No shortage there. But I think the power of the will and tuning into our will when we need to, when we must, is really, really, really important. And this is something I just wanted to share with you all, unscripted, from the heart, a little raw, that we have to all check in every once in a while and realize what matters. And that these are truths, love, presence, will that can guide us every day when times are good or when the times really suck, or so they feel that way. These are things we can rely on, lean on, and practice. Love, presence, will. And I wouldn't postpone the first two, the love and the presence. I think it is actually a beautiful thing to share love, share your presence with others. I think it can be one of the more enriching things you can do. So that concludes my comments today. I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes to hear me out. I'd love to hear how this landed with you. You can send me a note at hello@morecareerwellness.com. By the way, More is a company I've built, and we're building a destination for professionals who are at a crossroads, who are looking at their life and realizing that the status quo of life, and a lot of this is about careers that we deal with it more, they realize that status quo is status no, or status no-go. And we've got a platform built around coaching, curriculum, and community to help people navigate towards a much brighter, more exciting, compelling future that will light them up. So you can check us out at morecareerwellness.com. Again, thanks for joining me today. Keep your eyes on for future episodes, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.